Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. I thank you so much for joining us here on the program. I thank you every single time that we get together here on this program. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., and Wednesdays for a special edition of Tell Me Your Story at 9 a.m. That's Wednesday mornings. And we hope that you will join us for all four editions. If you're not able to, and I find it hard to believe that you couldn't, but hey, some people's schedules just wouldn't accommodate those four. We have podcasts. They're on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, and many other locations that you folks are reposting our interviews too, and thank you for doing that. I'm a one-man band, okay? I don't have an entourage or a staff or assistants or anything of that nature. So everything that gets done is done by me, which means that if it's not done the way most people do it, it's because I don't know any other way to do it and haven't learned the new way, and I'm working on that. Also, YouTube. Yes, you can watch these videos, and we hope that you will go to YouTube and subscribe. So I'm going to give you the quick stats. On YouTube, we have 31 subscribers. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's 31 more than I had before I started, okay? And as of this specific broadcast, podcast, videocast, the stats on SoundCloud, and this is from all of the different podcast sources, we have over, and this is in 3 years and 7 months, 40,000 listens. 40,000 listens. Thank you. Thank you for listening, telling your friends, subscribing, being notified that the new interviews are up there. Hey, I say this almost every time I give the stats. I don't know what those numbers mean. All I know is, hey, it's great that you folks are listening. I also hope that when you are listening and you like what we are doing, it resonates with you. I hope that you will take some time to consider supporting this broadcast, podcast, videocast in a financial way, because there are some expenses like the SoundCloud and other things that we use. And so if you can help us out financially, we would greatly appreciate that. That's why we have a PayPal account for your security as well as ours. And if you want to send money to us, any amount is welcome and gratefully appreciated. Just send it to richard@richarddugan.com through PayPal, okay? Or you can go to the link that's on the homepage or missions page of our website, richarddugan.com. And finally, as we bring this little segment of the program to a close, so to speak, we hope that you will take the time during this, the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to stop and listen to that still small voice. Find a place where you can be at peace, be calm, be relaxed, and just allow yourself to sort of rejuvenate, re-energize, and refocus your awareness, your consciousness, your attention. We hope that you will do that. All right, today's program, I think you're going to really enjoy. I know I am. This is a guest who I found through a new source that I subscribe to now that allows me to either A, be a guest on many of their programs, and I will be a guest on her program sometime in the not-too-distant future, but also who are going to be guests on this program, and she is today. And we are so happy to have her with us. She actually goes by, and if I can bring this up very quickly here, ladies and gentlemen, she goes by the Black Sheep Christian, and her name is Ashley Rutledge. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. And where are you joining us from?
I'm from Dayton, Ohio. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I guess the first question that I have for you, and it has to do with the name of your podcast, Black Sheep Christian. First of all, where does that name come from for you?
Yeah, great question. That comes from my past. I've always, let's just say, went on a different path than the other sheeps.
Okay.
God had to rein me in a few times.
Oh, I know the
when
feeling. I know the feeling. But
but
this has nothing to do with the fact that you are a black woman.
no, it does not.
More
It
from
does
a,
not.
shall we say, an emotional, philosophical perspective as you were growing up.
No,
No.
no, no, it does. Well, yeah, kind of, sort of, but
Mm-mm.
it really is for everyone who feels that, or anyone who feels that they are different from the norm,
Mm,
because that's what black sheep means. You are
yeah.
different from the norm. So I felt I was different from the norm in my family, in my community, in some form or capacity.
Hmm.
And as I grew older, it's kind of like, I'm not the only one who
Yeah.
feels different from the norm.
It's funny, too, because at the age of 33, my family was at a family reunion in Florence, Arizona, 60 miles south of Phoenix, where I was born and raised in Phoenix. And my brother and I went for a walk out in the desert, and we got to talking. And we never knew this about each other, but we both felt independently that we were the black sheep of the family. He thought he was, and of course, I always thought that I was. And at that point, I think we finally realized, oh, I guess we're not. Because a black sheep is usually solo. Because if there are two of you who think
Yes.
you are, well, now you're no longer the black sheep because now you have a group of two. And of course, you know what he said, wherever two or more are gathered in my name, a black sheep. Now, you are also a born again Christian,
Yes, yes, I am.
obviously the black sheep Christian. So, just taking that name, it implies to me, and maybe to our listeners, and I'll have you explain, that you do not conform to, adhere to, lean toward the traditional, orthodox, traditional doctrine and dogma of, and I'm going to use the broad term Christendom, whether it be a Catholic or Protestant or otherwise. You don't fall into that box.
Correct, correct. I don't. I'm not a member of any church. I was baptized at a church, and they consider that a membership. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a member of any church. I church hopped quite a bit in my 20s, to the point where it concerned my dad. like, why are you going to all these different churches?
Yeah.
But yeah, I do not. I remember I interviewed someone, Dr. Denise, and she said it best, that she was a Jesus follower. And I said,
Oh.
ooh, I said, I like that. And the reason why I don't align with a particular church is because as I'm going through this journey, I'm learning that what the quote unquote as a whole, the
Mm-hmm.
church as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not all churches,
Right.
but just to let you know, but there are churches out there that are very rules based. Some who say that they're open, quote unquote, come as you are, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get yourself settled in, it kind of comes clicky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and you just feel like you're serving a business, not a church, because there are churches out there, especially those mega churches,
Oh, yeah.
that are very business based. I feel like the further I go down the rabbit hole, the more more I'm like, is this God's house or is this your house?
Yes. Very good. Very good. Now, I will throw another twist to you. You say, you use that line of one of your guests, Jesus follower.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, now, I have done a little processing of my own.
Okay.
Now, first of all, I consider myself a metaphysician.
Okay.
Second of all, I also adhere to one of the tenets, or I should say one of the quotes, of the founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah. And I was actually a Baha'i for about a year and a half back in the 90s. And the quote is this: if you reject one of the messengers of God, you reject them all. If you accept one of the messengers of God, you accept them all. And now for the third point. Jesus was a Jew. Jesus never converted to Christianity. Jesus never said, "Follow me," the personality. And so, if I was going to be a true follower of Jesus, I would be a Jew. Right? Think about it. Think about it, right? And
Yeah.
one more, and this is a feather in your cap as a woman. The first person to recognize who Jesus was following his resurrection was whom?
2 women.
Thank you very
And
much.
that's interesting in itself because
Yes.
women weren't considered as
They were
great
property
sources.
or less
Right.
than.
Right, right. So the fact that scripture even says 2 women, it almost implied that it was supposed to give each other some weight,
Yeah. Now think
more than
about
one
it.
person saw.
Now think about it. The patriarchy at that time, and even following when they were compiling the book we know of as the Bible today, they made a tactical error in the text because they left that in. See, Peter shouldn't, and this is just an observation on my part,
Oh.
Peter should never have been made the first, shall we say, founder, so to speak, or the first person to run the church. Air quotes, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not watching YouTube. These 2 women should have been, Mary Magdalene in particular.
Oh.
And now here's what's interesting. This is what I love about, because I kind of put it in my own verbiage. Mary Magdalene sees him, recognizes who he is from the get-go. And guess what she does? The first thing she does is she wants to reach out and touch him. And I put it this way. He says, up. No, hold on. The paint's not dry yet. Don't touch. Okay? It's not dry yet.
Interesting.
I've just been I was Simonized, so hold off. But she recognized who he was from the get-go. Whereas when he came upon the apostles, they're going, "Hey man, can you tell us where the nearest pub is? We need to knock back a blow for our dear friend who just died." They didn't have a clue as to who he was. Not right then, no, not right then. So, instead of being a Catholic, born and raised, okay, I'm no longer practicing. I got it right and have moved on. But quite honestly, that's just my observation, my perspective, that a true follower would be Jewish, would not be a Christian. And considering the fact that the word Christian was a derogatory comment created by the Romans. It was
I learned something new.
almost profanity. Yeah, dude.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I learned something new.
And that's what I understand from what history I have read. I just find that real interesting. Let me ask you about your upbringing. Now, obviously, born and raised as a Christian, you've, as you use the term, church hopped. But before you started hopping churches, okay, what were the major fundamental underpinnings of your upbringing by your family, by your parents?
Yeah, great question. So, my parents are conservative. They've been married for over 30 years. Met when they were 18, 19, and when in the military. And yeah, my dad worked. My mom stayed home when me and my brother were young. So our household was very traditional. It was a very traditional household.
And in terms of the denomination, was there Protestant, Catholic?
Baptist.
Baptist, okay.
Yeah, Baptist.
I have to tell you that I worked for 15 years at a Christian radio station back during the 80s, the decade of the 80s into the 90s to 95. 15 years there. And I have to tell you that the programming that we put on the air, for the most part, especially on the weekends, I grew to absolutely love, and most of it was Southern Baptist, Pentecostal. It was a lot of the black churches in Phoenix. We had broadcast lines going to them where we'd actually carry their church services. And the more that I heard, the more, so to speak, at home I felt. I mean, it was just, it was joyous. It was so exciting, if you will. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I do. And you know what church hopping allowed me to learn was how different groups praise and worship God,
Mm-hmm.
which is very fascinating. Um, because the black churches, like the black churches, like what you said, the Pentecostal, the Baptist,
Mm-hmm.
they're more, their soul is into it, their body and mind. When they are
Oh,
praise and
yeah.
worship, it is just it's a completely different energy, and it's so hard to describe unless you're there.
Yeah.
And that's why one day I would love to travel to Africa, because I've seen the videos and I think they are the epitome of what praise and worship is.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody just moves at the same time. It's like watching birds fly in the sky, and how when they flock together, when they fly together, they just move simultaneously.
Yeah.
And that's how like African churches are. They just move simultaneously, and you just I just want to be there. So with that said, some of the more conservative, like I wouldn't say conservative, like Catholics,
Mm-hmm.
um
Little
some of the
more
white
restrained.
churches,
Little more
they're more
restrained.
restrained.
Yes. Yeah.
They just stand.
Oh, let me
Yeah, they
tell you.
they just stand.
You ever been to a folk mass? You ever been
No.
to a folk mass? Oh, I've been to quite a few of them when I was growing up. On Saturdays, Saturday evenings, we'd go to folk mass that counted for Sunday service because we had
Yeah.
something going on Sunday,
Yeah.
and it was guitars and maybe a tambourine, that kind of thing. But it was still, a little restrained.
It was. It
Yeah.
was. I remember on Easter, I went to a white church on Easter. And Easter, um, the day of the Holy Rollers, you know,
Oh yeah.
people who claim they're Christians, they're roll in, roll out, holy
Mm-hmm.
rollers. So,
Mm-hmm.
so the sanctuary was packed, and so they had seating outside the sanctuary, and the band was playing, and I was all the way in the back. I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So after the service was done, the lead of the band, he came and approached me, and he was like, "We saw you." After all those people, I'm all the way in the back. They saw me
Mm.
dancing.
You cannot hide sometimes, can you? It's not like in school where I'm gonna go sit in the back row. The teacher never called on me.
Right.
Yeah, and
But he appreciated that.
yeah,
The band appreciated
yeah,
that.
yeah. Now I have had the privilege of attending a number of churches over the years, as well as other religious institutions, and I, in my first marriage, was married to a woman whose family, her father, and his ancestry came from Russia, and they were members of the Byzantine Rite of the Catholic Church. Very, very traditional. Matter of fact, I have a hard copy of the liturgy, and you could videotape the liturgy today and the liturgy 10 years ago. All right, the Mass on the same, say, Holy Day, and it would be virtually the same, with the exception maybe of the homily, the sermon. That is how traditional. Now, that's one of the things that I love about the Catholic Church is the ritual, the ceremony, the traditions. I'm curious about you and the church hopping that you've done, and maybe some of the churches that maybe you said, I'm going to come back next week, and you go back several weeks at a time. What about that in terms of not only your experiences, but your thoughts as to the importance of ritual, tradition, and ceremony, especially when it comes to one's personal relationship with God?
That's a wonderful question. That's a great question, because what what is interesting about rituals and traditions? is that they what they're supposed to do is be able to respect God, his house, bring in his energy, spirit, and to be able to worship, praise him accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
What tends to happen, and what I've noticed, is that people do it so many times that their heart isn't in it, because the point, it's important to respect God, but your heart needs to be in that ritual, that practice that you're doing. And I say that because I went to a mass, and um there's a point where, you know, the priest, pastor priest, he says something, and then the audience or the
Mm-hmm.
congregation says something back. You know, he says something da 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 da, and people like da 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so boring. It was so lifeless.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
so lifeless.
yeah.
And I understood what they were doing,
Right.
but what's the point if your heart isn't even in it?
Mm-hmm. Ashley Rutledge is my guest. She is the Black Sheep Christian. She has a podcast. And where can people hear your podcast?
Oh, yeah. Great question. Apple, iTunes, Spotify,
All
Stitcher.
the usual
Yeah,
places.
all the usual. Yeah, all the usual places.
Well, we'll be linked to your website too. You have a website as well, I take it.
Yes, I do. Theblacksheepchristian.org.
Oh, so it's nonprofit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. So that's a journey in itself too. I mean,
Okay.
I
Uh,
do have a .com,
okay.
but I was so eager to get it up and running.
Right.
That's where the org came from.
Okay. All right. Okay. Very good. So blacksheepchristian.org is her website. We hope that you will go to her website and check out what she is doing and listen to some of her podcasts as well. Eventually, you will hear she and I chatting away on her podcast. She'll be asking me the questions. I'll get grilled.
No, no.
I have to tell you that it feels really strange to be on that side. Not asking the questions, but giving the answers. Even though the answers, they tend to flow. I've often said that on these programs that the universe asks the questions. I'm just along for the ride.
Yes.
And it's the same thing I would say probably in the context of giving the answers, is that I believe wholeheartedly in what we're doing with the program and what we want to accomplish. We want to change the world better for everyone, not just a select few. I think it's possible. When I hear people being pessimistic about the possibilities, then I say, well, then what's the point of even living? Why?
Mm.
Why get an education? All right. What's the point? Because if there's no possibility for change, then there's no point in living. My book, Choices, that we'll talk about on your program, has to do with the fact that we all have choices. I don't care what your situation is, you have choices. And there are times when you don't know what choices you have until you stop. And many times it requires you to go within, to listen to that still small voice. Tell us about your experiences, your inner life, if that's appropriate to do so, in terms of the guidance that you receive from within.
That is a learning experience that I'm still learning. And God speaks to us all the time. And and what's fascinating is, here's a being, I guess you can say,
Mm-hmm.
created the universe, created gravity, how things move. We are supposed to obey him. And yet he communicates to each and every one of us differently based on who we are and who he made us to be.
Mm-hmm.
For Moses, it was a burning bush to get his attention. I think I would probably need a burning bush. God would probably be whispering in my ear, and I'm not hearing anything. I need to put a burning bush
That's
in
good.
order
That's
to get
good.
to get the attention. So I had to learn how God speaks to me. And that is for me is through dreams. And then I'm also learning my that gut feeling, my heart, how he is communicating to me in a certain way. It sounds so far-fetched and weird, but I'm still learning. And then one thing I'm also learning how to do is sit quietly with God, allowing him to speak to me,
Mm-hmm.
to approach me, and to be, I mean, he's my dad. I need to give him time.
Mm-hmm.
If
Here, here,
he's the
here.
father,
Yeah.
I need to give him time. So I I've learned some hard lessons over the years because he's spoken to me the way I should be spoken to, and I've ignored him. But as I get older, I know when he's speak. Okay, God, I hear you. Okay, give me a minute. I may not like what he says, but that doesn't mean I do ask him to give me a minute and then I follow.
Well, I will tell you that we also refer to it as listening to one's intuition.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a situation where the impressions, if you will, promptings is the word I want to use. The promptings. I was in a personal growth program back in the 80s, and we were asked to take this long white sheet of construction paper. It was kind of narrow, and write down something that was of meaning to us. Something. And I wrote down, "I will listen to," and I had written that in longhand. Okay, cursive. For those who don't know what that is, Google it. And because they don't teach it much in school anymore.
No, they
But I
don't.
wrote that first line in cursive. The next line I wrote it all in block cap letters. So the first line was, "I will listen to," and the second line was, "and follow the promptings of my friend." And that was how I refer to my still small voice, as my friend. Okay? And that to me is so crucial. I'm going to say this facetiously, not seriously, but what's the point of listening if you're not going to follow? Now, I think a lot of people, and maybe this is where this comes from for you as well, and it has for me, we struggle with this because we have this strong belief in free will. You
Mm.
know, it's like, wait, this is my life. This is my life. I should be able to do whatever I want. And so forth. And so it's a challenge for all of us.
Yeah, that's a really interesting, um, that's a very interesting point to make, which is what we're kind of going through right now as a country. People who are claiming they're doing this for God, but there are hate speech and actions that are not of love,
Mm.
against, the enemy. That's not what Jesus and God spoke about.
Mm-hmm.
When in particular in scripture with the prostitute,
Mm-hmm.
um no, she was caught in the act having an affair with another man. Caught in the act. They
Mm-hmm.
drug her out. They were ready to stone her, which was a very horrible punishment, which was putting her basically in a pit and just throwing these heavy rocks
Mm-hmm.
at them. But anyways, the after which the crowd dissipated, Jesus spoken to her, and I'm paraphrasing, it was like, don't take this freedom for granted. Don't take this for granted.
Right. There was a back in the 80s, a Christian comedian, sadly, who was debunked. He claimed to be a former Satanist high priest, and that was the big selling point. His name was Mike Warnke. Turns out he lied. He lied about his past. He was never a Satanist high priest, and so on and so forth. Yet all of his comedy was based on that. However, there were still some good things that came out of it, and this has to do with what you just spoke of, that particular passage, that story. And he told the story in this context, in this particular way. You know, here are all these people, and they're about ready to, they're all picking up rocks, and they're going to throw them at this girl because she's a prostitute. She was caught in the act. And of course, Jesus, you know, he's down there and he's doodling in the dirt. You know, just drawing, doodling in the dirt. And finally, you know, he stands up and, hey, you know, those of you who haven't sinned, you know, if you haven't sinned, you can throw the first rock. And of course, they all kind of look at one another and realize they'd been schnookered, and so they all, as he puts it, they all dropped their rocks and split. And I heard a great line this morning coming into work. That was, I think it was by a country artist in particular, but it had to do with, you know, put that rock back in your pocket because you live in a glass house. You know, and I think that's one of the issues that you're alluding to, and it's actually more than alluding to, but nonetheless, that we all have our foibles or picadillos, whatever phrase you want to use. We have our light side and we have our dark side, and and that's what makes us who we are. Yes, you've had those dark moments in your life, right? But you can't get rid of them. Because if you did, that would not make you who you are today. A lot of people want to pull those threads out. They want, and I think that, for example, guilt, okay, is basically trying to do that. You know, feeling guilty over something that you did in your past. And so I'm just curious about you and your observations about the various facets of who we are. I mean, we were created with all of these various elements. There's an Indian story, very, very briefly, that has to do with a black and a white wolf. You know, and this little boy is asking, in terms of the black and white wolf who are about ready to go at each other, who's going to win? He says it depends upon which one you feed.
Mm, mm, mm. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Talk to us a little bit about your perspective, your observations, etc., on all of this in terms of your personal growth and process of living your life and being. And here's an interesting one for you. And being, as it says in the New Testament, being perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, that reminds me of when I spoke to someone, what they said was Jesus, after he was raised from the dead, that he still had his scars. He still had his scars. And that was in a metaphor of imperfection. That Jesus still had his scars once he was resurrected. And also, when you said with the wolf, tell me why I was thinking about the Batman movie with the scene with the good Batman movie with Heath Ledger.
Oh yes.
In the scene where it's towards the end because they're on the boat, you know, and where there's two ships, and it was like deciding who was going to blow up whom, and Heath Ledger was like, "This is so old." Like,
Go ahead.
it was kind of like it was a monologue, like, "You need me," and I remember that monologue. I was like, "Wow, Batman needs a Joker." I thought that's an interesting one. But anyway, I don't know why I thought about that when you talked about the wolves. But anyways, with my journey, and I call it a journey because I'm going to make mistakes along the way. I know I'm going to fall. I mean, scripture says that we all fall short in the glory of God.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, what all that God cares about is my heart. Is my heart invested in him? Do I love him? Do I serve him? Is my heart in him?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all that matters. And that's what we really are going to be judged on. Because in the book of Matthew, God is separate, because the parable separates sheep from the goats.
Mm-hmm.
He says a few lines. I was hurt, I was hungry, I was da 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 da. And people were like, well, the sheep's goats, they're like, we didn't know you were hungry and this, that, and the other. And what that is saying is that God doesn't really need anything because he's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But what he is saying is love. You took care of each other as I asked. You worshiped, praised me um, as I requested.
Mm-hmm.
Here you go. Here you go. I hope I answered your question. I feel like my brain is just going elsewhere. But really, what it comes down to is I know I'm going to fall. I know I'm not perfect. God took things away from me um, in order for me to be closer to Him.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's another little twist on the whole aspect of being perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And this is something I pondered back in the 80s, early 90s, when I kept hearing that phrase. And it's like, what the heck does that mean, to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect? And I got to thinking, okay, well, God is neither good nor evil, light nor dark. God just is. And in the Old Testament, in Psalms, it says, I am that I am. And that's what came to me. That's what being perfect is. Just be who you are. Right now, this instant. Has nothing to
Mm.
do with the past, has nothing to do with the future. Your thoughts?
You know what? That is one of my favorite Bible verses. That's Exodus 3:14.
Mm-hmm.
That's God coming to Moses. And Moses like, who is this? And God goes, I am that I am, and I sent me. And that's one of my favorite Bible verses. It became one of my favorite when Prince of Egypt, Disney movie. I thought that they did a great job
Mm-hmm.
as a kid at that time. And that Bible verse resonates with me too, because I listening to you, that's a really interesting point of view. I at that time took it as confidence. God doesn't have confidence, but that he knows what he's doing
Mm-hmm.
and he knows what he's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
doing. He's coming to the right person in the right way in order to speak to them. And here he is about to deliver a message, some type of instruction. It was for instruction for Moses, but that I find your interpretation of the passage very interesting because I took it as confidence
Mm-hmm.
because I was not a confident kid at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and again, that's the one nice thing about it is that every time you read a passage, sometimes it speaks to you differently. It's never going to give you the
Mm.
same message each time, which is what's so fascinating about many of the other, what I like to refer to as the ancient wisdom teachings. The Bible is just one of many that I put in that category. I'm curious about your observations about some of the other, and this is the term that I use, the other philosophies in the world. How do you look at the very unique and divergent and diverse ways of living and believing and practicing one's faith in the different philosophies that are out there?
Oh, wow. That's an excellent question. And that is something that I am still learning because it's just so much and it's so in depth. It's just so in depth about what other religions, philosophies are doing. But a lot of it has to do, it's coming out or that is out, which is from the ancient times from history. And that's another thing to be learning is history in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Why, like meditation? Now Christianity, more Christians are more welcoming with meditation than years past. Meditation was like, no, those are the East, those are the Buddhists, that's blasphemy. No, but now people are welcoming meditation because it's like what I said, sitting quietly in prayer. That's a form of meditation, to be able to sit quietly, to be able to rid your mind of whatever's on your mind, what shouldn't be in your mind. It could be the stress, it could be, everything, or anything and everything, or things that you even shouldn't even be worried about, the negativity. Yoga. I've done yoga and I enjoyed yoga. I know yoga is a form of a religious practice. But what I like about yoga is that, first of all, I don't have to sweat. Okay. I got a lot of hair in my head. I don't have to sweat. I'm active with my body. I know people have issues with the namaste, what it means, but me as a Christian, I know where my place is with God.
Mm-hmm.
I know where my place is with Him.
Okay.
So by me practicing yoga, I'm not leaving God. I'm actually being more in tune with God because I'm doing something for it's a quiet time. It's a quiet space.
Mm-hmm.
What the instructor says, I don't have to listen to. I can try and do that movement. But if my mind and my heart is with God, and sometimes I do prayer as I'm doing my yoga moves,
Mm-hmm.
as long as I'm with God, I'm with God. That's all that matters. But I know yoga is a practice of another religion that people don't like. And it's just like, who cares? I like yoga. I don't need to sweat, and it's considered exercise. What?
Well, a Catholic saint by the name of Teresa of Avila said once, God is amongst the pots and the pans. And I've also heard it said that if you are looking for God, you will find Him. The converse is also true. If you spend your time looking for the devil, you will find him under every single rock and behind every tree. I would rather spend my time looking for God amongst the pots and the pans, or amongst the yoga positions, downward dog and whatever else is there. Okay? I do find it fascinating, the criticism that is heaped upon many of the other non-Christian philosophies, and that criticism comes from most of the time a lack of genuine knowledge of that philosophy. Genuine knowledge. Now,
yes.
Think about this. I said to a Christian once during that period of time back in the 80s, early 90s, did you know that Christianity is a metaphysical religion? And they said, oh, no, my God, that's... I said, do you know the definition of the word metaphysical? No?
I don't.
Definition of the word metaphysical is beyond the physical. Beyond the physical. And that's what the definition is, and that's what Christianity is too. Yes, there were words spoken in regards to living in the material world. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and unto God what is God's. But there was also, seek ye first the kingdom of God and all its righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. All right? And so on and so on. It was a mixture. But the point was not to sustain one's life in this material world. That was not the point of the message, as I see it.
Correct.
So Christianity,
Scripture does, correct. Because Scripture does say, I can't even think of the Bible verse, but our treasures in heaven versus on earth.
Exactly. Build up treasures in heaven. Yeah, exactly. And I find it so interesting. I can't think of any other word to use here. How unaware, unenlightened, and uneducated most people are of the Christian faith, who do not. We on this program, we like to define terms. That's why when we first started out, what in the world is a black sheep Christian? Define that for us, please. It's important to do that, because when you start to understand the meaning behind the words, then you start to understand the context. For example, and I'm going to throw this out there for you and for our listeners. I know you are probably very familiar with a lot of the Bible verses, Old Testament, Leviticus in particular, the 613 Jewish laws, okay? And of course, especially the one that speaks to the prohibition against relationships of the same sex. Now, I was interviewing a rabbi. Now, if you know anything about what it takes to become a rabbi, the study, the education. So he and I were chatting, and he says, do you know the context under in which this law was written or established? Okay. Now, God wrote the 10 Commandments. I do not believe he wrote the 613 laws. I believe those were written by men. But do you know the reason why that law was established? It was for the purposes of not interfering with the procreative process of man. Now, back then, in the first century and before, I would venture there probably weren't even close to 1 billion people on the planet. We are now in the 21st century. We have nearly 8 billion people on this planet. So let me ask you this question. Do you honestly believe that the procreative process has been interfered with by people who have same-sex relationships? I don't think so, Tim.
No. as a matter as a matter of fact, you know, I've had this very same conversation, and um first of all, um what we need to remember here too is a lot of what we know today, the church tells us we're supposed to know or how we're supposed to know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I am slowly learning that Christianity has always been around, but this is a different version of Christianity in order to promote a lifestyle, race, what we're here today.
Mm-hmm.
Because someone told me, and I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. I said, I don't know why I didn't think of this, because with slavery, with slaves coming, they gave them Christian,
Mm-hmm.
the Bible, and someone was like, they were already Christians. It was a different version of Christianity then.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I should have known that. But anyways, back to back 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 to LGBTQ.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I I find this interesting today because I don't even know why they're so concerned about LGBTQ, because I know a lot of heterosexual couples, my particular age group,
Mm-hmm.
the millennials, younger, have expressed not having children for financial reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Miley Cyrus said something about climate change.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, that
Mm-hmm.
was a
Mm-hmm.
moment. I'm not going to have kids in this planet. It's going to ruins.
Yeah.
And some just simply just don't want. They just don't have that instinct, talent, whatever you want to call it, which is perfectly fine. But yet we are so hard on focus on the LGBTQ community. And it's like, we have heterosexual couples who have expressed not having children because of financial reasons, daycare, costs. I am a single mom. And by the time my daughter was done with daycare, I spent nearly 60 grand. I said to myself, I just paid for my daughter's college
Mm-hmm.
in her first years of life.
Mm-hmm.
So, why not have programs that will help families or wannabe parents or people who or grandparents who are raising or helping raising their their
Mm-hmm.
children's children? Why can't we have programs in order to promote the appropriation,
Mm-hmm.
whether that is daycare,
Mm-hmm.
food, housing? It is so amazed. I'm so amazed. There are families who are out there who are struggling, who wants to be able to live in suburbia, but can't live in suburbia because they don't have the finances. And all they want to do is to be able, what everybody else wants to do, to be able to live in a clean, quiet, comfortable home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
Uh, that's what it's all about in that respect. In terms of what we talked about earlier in the program, and I made the reference to changing the world for the better
mm,
for everyone.
mm,
May sound like a utopian dream. So what? Let's dream. Because real good dreams come true. I mean, I'll tap my heels together and make it and work to do my part to help people when wherever I can. I mean, I can't, from a financial standpoint, I can't do a lot, but there are other things that I can do, and hopefully through this
mm,
program, we can inspire people through what we talk about, through the energy that goes out from these programs to share with other people, regardless of the fact that we might come from different philosophical perspectives. How about this for a kick in the pants? You know the phrase. You know the phrase. As a Christian, and I heard this time and time again over those 15 years. Yes, you need to, establish and develop and so forth your personal relationship with Jesus or God. Okay? Personal. Which means it ain't none of your business what my relationship with God is. It is none of your business whether you think I am saved or not, because it's my relationship, not yours. How have you, I know you've had to deal with this, how have you dealt with that aspect of your faith and inner life when other people come to you? I'm sure they have, and said, Ashley, you're not going down the right road there. You need to make a change. I don't think you're right with God. We need to baptize you again, okay? We're going to put you down in the water for 10 minutes, okay? No oxygen tank. We're going to get you saved. I had people, ministers, tell me that at the Christian radio station once.
mm.
That I was not saved, I was not ready to meet God. And here's the analogy I used, and it just so happened, it happened around Thanksgiving time. I said, I came in one day and I said, you mentioned the other day that you didn't think I was saved and ready to meet God. And I says, well, I just want to share this with you, this analogy, okay? I said, you and I are standing on the edge of a huge body of water, lake, whatever. And you have every means at your disposal to keep me from drowning. Would you? He says, well, of course not, because we're standing right there on the shore. I said, okay, point taken. I said, now I'm out in the water and I'm drowning and I don't want you to save me, and you have every means at your disposal to save me. Will you? And he said, yes. I said, so you'd violate my own personal civil rights, human rights of self-determination, and you'd save me. He said, yeah. I said, okay, that's fine. Point taken. I said, okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to go out to your vehicle and I want you to start the engine. Then, without turning it off, I want you to start it again. Then I want you to go home And I want you to tell your wife to go ahead and cook the turkey. And when it's done, I want you to have her cook it again. You'll ruin your car and you will burn the turkey. Do not try to save me. I am already saved. Well, you know and I know that as a minister or pastor with a certain level of arrogance, my analogy was flawed. Okay. And I just left it at that. I said, you know what? Doesn't matter. I don't have to justify myself to him. Again, going back to the whole, it's my relationship with God, not his.
Yeah, yeah. But you know what? With that said, that puts the onus on us
Mm-hmm.
in order to have that relationship. As I said before, God is my father. So if he's my father, he provides, he protects.
Mm-hmm.
It's important for me to have a conversation with him. It's important for
That's
me to
it.
take the time for
Mm-hmm.
me to talk to him. And I always, at the end of my podcast, I tell people, please read your Bible
Mm-hmm.
because and pastors, priests, they all know this. We are not reading our Bible. We don't have time. We don't have time. So we like to go and see the sermons, um, these beautiful presentations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're basically beautiful presentations put together. Great acting, sound, like it's a whole Broadway production every
Mm-hmm.
Sunday in order to package a couple of Bible verses into a message.
Yeah.
So we're missing a lot. We're missing
Mm-hmm.
context, we're missing pretext, because I remember when we were talking about a specific Bible verse,
Mm-hmm.
I remember we had to read before
Mm-hmm.
and after, and sometimes the entire chapter.
Mm-hmm.
In
Context.
order, yeah, in order to understand that single line, in
Mm-hmm.
order to understand that single line.
Yeah.
So we have become lazy
Mm-hmm.
with our personal relationship with God. Now,
Yeah.
our personal relationship is our personal relationship because at the end of the day, God's going to judge us personally
Right.
and
Right.
individually. So that is really interesting. I have not gone through that yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that I will. What you have gone through, I have not gone through that yet. I
Mm.
haven't had that. I haven't had that conversation with the pastor
Mm-hmm.
or
Well,
priest
here's
yet.
here's one I had with the Monsignor of the Byzantine Rite of the Catholic Church, and I was impressed by his answer to my query. Now, based upon historical evidence, if you will, crucifixions during Jesus' time, prior to and after, the final indignation was they were stripped naked. Okay, they were wearing nothing. All right. And it was the final humiliation, if you will, as if hanging on a cross wasn't bad enough. And so all of the crucifixes I ever saw in all of the churches and around people's necks, etc., where it was actually a crucifix, not just a cross, Jesus was wearing a loincloth. And I thought, well, doesn't it say that ye shall know the truth and the truth will set you free? So I asked the Monsignor, I said, why is it? And by his answer, he acknowledged what I had found. I said, why is it that if this is the case and that's the reality, that's the truth of what happened, why don't we show Jesus in that final moment of indignity, of humiliation, etc., because that was part of the sacrifice? And his response was, because, I paraphrase, we do not want to upset the sensibilities of the people. Which I thought was fascinating from the standpoint, again, well, wait a minute, but what about the truth? What about the truth? We're always talking about, knowing the truth.
I have never thought about that.
Yeah.
I have never thought about that. But it's interesting because David is the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Goliath and David. People forget that David took a sword and cut his head off.
Yeah, but we don't show that.
No, we don't.
Can't
No.
show that barbarity, the barbarian aspects.
No. And it was ruthless back then.
Yes.
It
Oh,
was
absolutely. Yeah,
horrible.
it really was. It really was. So it's always fascinating to me. By the way, talking about context, I read a book early on in that period of my life, and I interviewed the author of this book many times, and his name is John Noe, 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 and he wrote a book called The Apocalypse Conspiracy. I found it fascinating. It was the first book of the guests that I had been interviewing at that time. It was the first one I actually read cover to cover. And I'm highlighting and I'm going through it, and as I'm reading it and I get to the end of it, I'm going, I got to do this study. I have to research this myself. I've got to put my Bibles, I have many different versions thereof, and my Strong's Concordance, and I have to accept that both of these books are primary source information. Okay, there has to come a point where we have to agree on the source material. Okay, so Strong's Concordance, which is pretty authoritative, right? Pretty authentic, because it's defining the words from the original languages. And he had this one passage that he looked up, and this was part of where, when you talk about the Christian faith, it is an internal process. There is what is called a rapture passage. They will be caught up to meet him in the air in the clouds of glory. All right? Now, the word he focused on was the word air, A-I-R. In Strong's Concordance in the New Testament, in that passage, there are two definitions. Two different definitions. One is the atmosphere. The planes and the birds and the clouds float through there, fly, and so forth through the air. The other definition is connected to the Old Testament Genesis. God breathed the breath of life into the nostrils of Adam. And it turns out that it is that second definition that is used for the word air in that New Testament passage. And that said to John that the rapture is not a literal physical event. It is an internal spiritual event. And the second coming. There's nowhere in the New Testament where it refers to the second, to. Return, yes, it does say return, but it doesn't say how many times. And as he continued to do his research throughout the entire Bible, what he found was it's possible for you and I, as believers in God, to have that experience, that second coming, over and over and over again in our lives. And I found that so fascinating. Now, I'm not saying that I believe all of that 100%. All I'm saying is here was an individual who is a Bible-believing, fundamentalist, evangelical Christian who is saying there's something wrong with Christendom. There's something amiss because the church, televangelism, the radio broadcasts, etc., they're going down the wrong road. And if the church was really here to help the people, the church would be not open to the saints, but open to the sinners. That's what it's there for, right?
Yes.
That's what that was his premise for doing this research and doing this investigation.
Well, Jesus said that he wasn't here for the healthy.
No, he was not here.
He was here for the sick.
That's right. That's right. And one final thing I'd love for you to talk about. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead after 4 days, right?
Right.
Paul said, though, it is appointed every man once to die and then the judgment. So was Lazarus really dead? Or was Paul lying? Because you and I both know that there are people around us, people we know, who have been declared dead and come back to life. So the question then is, what is death?
Yes, I've thought about that too.
And again,
I thought about that too.
Yeah, and I don't put forth these questions to undermine anybody's faith or undermine the Bible. It's a query of mine because much is lost in translation from the original languages into English, and I've talked about this on programs before. But have you go ahead?
Yeah, I thought about this too, and so this is where I'm at right now because I can always change. I could be wrong. but this is where I'm at right now.
Yeah, me too.
Because Jesus was prophesied to be raised from the dead. So if Lazarus was, then Lazarus was the one who should be,
Mm-hmm.
who should have saved us from our sins.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought about that too. And I thought to myself, I don't think he was quote unquote dead. They probably did the checks. Because another thing too was healthcare wasn't even a word.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
You mean there
It
was
wa-
no Affordable Care Act back then? Doggone. Man.
and I'm certain that the remedies and stuff was just wild back then.
Oh yeah. Oh
but
yeah.
but if anything, they probably did their checks and said, "Oh, he's gone. He's dead." But I'm with you on this one. I don't think he was quote unquote dead. He may have had a weak pulse. His
Very
color was
weak.
probably, yeah,
Yeah.
very weak. His color was probably gone because what Jesus was doing was he was healing sick people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he was really sick.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
really
In a
sick.
coma, maybe. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. It doesn't say
It doesn't.
why. It just says, quote unquote. And so maybe that word dead or death, Lazarus was dead, maybe that word was mistranslated.
Mm,
I
mm,
mean,
mm.
again, I'm
And
just
and,
putting it
and,
out
and,
there.
and you're completely right. It could be mistranslated. I just learned last week that the King James has over 6,000 incorrections.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, and this was a scholar, and I was like, whoa,
Yeah. Yeah.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like it blew my
Yeah.
mind when he said that, because growing up, King James was it.
Yeah.
So this could very well be a misinterpretation when
Mm-hmm.
it went from one language to another. Easy.
I have so many different versions of the Bible. I have the book of, they call it the book of Yahweh, because
Yeah.
that's, I have a King James version. That was the first one that was actually given to me by one of the, I'll even mention his name. Harley Howard was his name. And he and I used to have some very interesting and friendly conversations about a lot of these kinds of things. And I actually would say to people that, you know what, if they want to brand a big H on my forehead for heretic, I will wear it proudly, because the answers that I got to my questions just didn't make any sense. And I was even told at one point, Richard, the founding fathers asked these questions and answered them. And if you just read the writings of the founding fathers, And so the first thing I thought was, well, who the heck set them up as the arbiters of the faith? That was number
Mm.
one. And then number two is, I never heard of none of these people, so that must put me in the same category as them, because I'm asking the same questions independently of even the knowledge of them and their questions and answers. But again, I didn't put myself up on any pedestal. It was like, well, who do they think they are anyway? That they have all the answers. That is why I encourage people to go within, because that is where you will get answers, but not answers like what we're kind of putting forth questions here. Answers in terms of answers to questions about you as an individual, about your life, about guiding you through your day to day, not about somebody else. Okay, and that's just my observation, that we need to get to know self. Wasn't it Shakespeare who said something along those lines? Maybe it was a philosopher as well who said, "To thy own self be true," and or something along those lines, and to know thyself. I can't remember the rest of the phrase. How important is it from your perspective and in your experience to get to know Ashley? I mean, the real Ashley, not the masks that we put on from moment to moment, day to day, from person to person as we go through our day.
Yeah, great question. I'm still learning about Ashley.
Hey, I'm 61 and I'm still learning about Richard, okay?
I'm still learning. It's interesting because it's like stages of life. What I thought when I was 10, I'm certainly not thinking the same thing now, you
Mm-hmm.
know. As I'm thinking as I'm in my 30s, I know I'm not going to think the same thing as I'm in my 50s. But that's part of the journey. That's part of the growth.
Yeah.
I am a very flawed individual. Um,
Are you
People
really? I mean,
say,
seriously, are you really? No, I ask that very seriously. Are you really flawed? Or is that what you have been told? You are who you are. And it's those, as you call them, flaws that make you part of what make you who you are.
yeah, that, you know what, you may make a fine point, but sometimes I sabotage myself.
Sure.
A
But that's
flawed
part of the learning
individual.
process, isn't it? That's part of the learning
Right.
process, right?
It is part of the learning
Yeah.
process. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have anxieties, I have issues. I mean, I have baggage. I have just ugliness, that's just like kind of
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah.
But, at the same token too, it's like God created me. I mean, this comes back to God being a perfect individual who created imperfect beings.
Mm.
And what I find so beautiful is I am an imperfect person, but God, who is perfect, loves this imperfection.
Mm.
And I think that's the most beautiful thing. Whatever people are going through, and I have to remind myself, in my times of trials and tribulations, that I am still loved no matter what I do. Now, I do like what we talked about, the woman, who was caught having sex.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus told her, I'm giving you this freedom, but
Mm-hmm.
don't take it for granted.
Yeah. Go,
And
as he said, go and sin no more.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I will share with you one more final observation before we wrap up here and get your perspective on it. And this kind of goes along with the whole perfection thing we were talking about earlier, and then, of course, your comments about your imperfections. One of the things that I kept hearing during that 15-year period was that we were nothing more than lowly worms, Yeah, we just the dregs of the earth, right? As a sinner, okay? In other words, if you weren't saved, there you were. And that the sacrifice was made, etc., for the purposes of saving us and cleaning us up, in baptism and blah, blah, blah. And I got to thinking about that, and I thought, wait a minute. If God created us and we are his children, even before the sacrifice, long before, okay, and we are his children, and he is going to sacrifice himself in the physical, that says to me that we are precious and priceless to the extent that he would even consider doing that. Which means that if it's even possible for this to happen, that following the acceptance of the sacrifice, we become even more priceless. You see where I'm going? We had to have been loved before for the sacrifice to even be made, and then we're loved even more if it's even possible to be loved more after. And that's what I found so distressing about the way in which quote unquote sinners are viewed in that
Mm,
respect.
mm. But we all are sinners, so who cares?
Very good. Very good.
We're all sinners because we all fall short in the glory of God. But see, see, that's the church's way of trying to fearmonger people
Mm-hmm.
and into doing what they want to be done.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting because I always think about this. It's like throughout the Bible.
Whoop, I've lost your audio. There
Oh
you go.
no,
There you
no.
go. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Continue
yeah,
about the
yeah. I was
Bible.
I was I was, I was taking dust off my keyboard and I accidentally muted myself.
So about
So
throughout the
throughout
Bible.
the Bible, throughout the Bible, God takes the most unqualified person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. David was unqualified.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was short, he was scrawny. Um, he was the youngest. He didn't have the experience,
Mm-hmm.
but yet he was one of the greatest kings. I mean, he was one of the greatest kings in order to, put God's, people together. I mean, who's another one? Moses was another one. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Moses had a stutter. He was a murderer, and yet God chose him to
Mm-hmm.
lead, his people out of slavery.
Right.
So, with that said, I just find it so interesting that churches still do this because God never did it. Even Paul was another murderer. He was with a whole group of people who wanted to kill people who were following Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And yet scholars believe he wrote more than half of the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Come on now.
Yeah.
Why are we still putting people down about their sins and imperfections?
Yeah.
Because God consistently
Yeah.
always goes to the bottom of the barrel
Yeah.
and lifts them up in order for his
Yeah.
purpose.
I know, it's interesting. Half the New Testament, ladies and gentlemen, was written by a former murderer. Okay? Think about that and then consider whether or not you want to read the Bible anymore because it was written by a former murderer. I mean, look at what happens in our day and age when an athlete or someone prominent in the public eye has created some most incredible stuff and then gets caught in their own net. And it's like, oh, I don't know. No, he's not going to be the greatest musician. No, we can't put him in the Hall of Fame. We can't do that because of this one thing that they did near the end of their lives that completely negates everything that they have done that's been of a positive nature. And yet, there are people who absolutely revere Paul. Paul was a murderer. I don't care if he got saved and had that Damascus event. He was a murderer. So we have to reject all of his books. We have to, based upon today's way of doing things. We have to do that.
Well, we might as well
And I'm being
put
facetious.
Mary Mac. We might as well put Mary in that conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Mary wrote a book, but they didn't include her.
They didn't?
And they didn't include her writings in
That's
the
right.
66 books.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we've got a contradiction here that we have to come to grips with as individuals. Not going to fix the problem here. Not going to do that. Even if we could, we wouldn't do it because that's not our job. That's not our job, at least not on a collective level here. Our process here is to learn about each other, learn about where we're coming from and where we're going to. Where are we going to next? What from your perspective, are you glass half full? Are you optimistic about humanity's future?
It depends on the day, but
Okay, there you go, folks.
I'm being honest.
Okay.
I'm being honest. I mean, God, Scripture says the road that we're going to go on.
Mm-hmm.
It according to Scripture, things are supposed to get a little bit more worse. Things are just going to get a little bit more harder.
Mm-hmm.
As we go down that road, because Jesus left. He had to leave because he told the disciples, like, guys, if I don't leave, I'm not going to be able to. We're not going to be able to get to where we need to be.
Exactly. Gotta go, kids, because I got things to do. All right, I got things to do. I got things to build, and we'll see you again. But I gotta go.
I always thought he wanted to go back to his heavenly pillows and sheets.
Hey,
because I'm sure it's so much better up there.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yes, and I bet you it's not just a thousand count sheet.
Right.
A million or something. Very soft.
Right. But anyways, we how Scripture is written, we're going to be veering off quite a bit off the path.
Yeah.
In order for Jesus to come back and to call his children back home,
Yeah.
and finish the
Yeah.
chapter. But at this point, I want to be that usher, to bring usher people back with the Lord, have that relationship with the Lord, and have a strong relationship with God. It's not about just believing in him. You just can't say, oh, my heart, I believe in him. Because God also says, I don't know you. So it's not just about your heart being in him, with him. It's about knowing who he is, because he's going to say, I don't know you.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about. So I'm a glass half full, glass half empty, but I just want to usher people back with the Lord, because as long as we get as many people with the Lord, I mean, heaven is supposed to be a beautiful place. Why not want to be there?
Exactly. Ashley Rutledge has been my guest here on the program. Tell me your story, New Paradigms for a New World. We're talking about the Black Sheep Christian podcast at blacksheepchristian.org, and we hope that you'll go there. We'll be linked to your website as well, and we look forward to having you back on the program, but also being on your program in the not-too-distant future as well to talk about the things that you want to talk about, Ashley, and I thank you so much for giving us so much time here on the program.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this. I enjoy this conversation, because this is where growth comes from.
Yeah.
This is where growth in a relationship with God comes from, to be able to fellowship.
Yeah. Well, as I shared with my eldest sister after she left the church with her now husband, and she's been with him for several decades, I said this at Thanksgiving seems to be a theme with me, but at Thanksgiving at my mother's house, wrong place to do this, but I did it anyway. She's challenging me on my salvation. And I said to her, I said, well, see, what you don't understand is that my beliefs of yesterday are not my beliefs of today, are not my beliefs of tomorrow, because I'm still alive. I'm still experiencing. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. And so as one of the ministers at the radio station said to me as we were conversing about Jesus and everything, they said, once you find Jesus, your search is over, because I've been on my search since I was 17. And I said, actually, once I find Jesus, my search has just begun. And so I have been searching since I was 17. Not even going to try to do the math right now, but I thank you again for joining us. I have 3 final questions for you that I want to ask you, that I ask all of my guests here on the program. I will do that in just a moment, but first I want to thank you for listening to Tell Me Your Story, as well as watching the YouTube channel Tell Me Your Story. And we certainly hope that you will listen to these programs Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., streaming live at those times, as well as the Wednesday special edition at 9 a.m., streamed on the website, richarddugan.com. And we are also podcasting on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeart, and Amazon Music, and many other locations. And we also hope that if this program resonates with you, we hope that you will support us financially through PayPal. You can go to PayPal and send through richard@richarddugan.com. And I thank you so much for doing that. And then also participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, the 2020s. I thank you so much for taking the time to go within, to listen to the still small voice, and find that quiet, peaceful, calm place where you can just re-energize, rejuvenate, relax, and just be calm for a little while, because the outside world is anything but. All right, so now to our final 3 questions for our guest here on the program. First one is, who is Ashley Rutledge?
Nice. Ashley Rutledge is the host of the Black Sheep Christian podcast, who is on a journey of learning about God in the most unorthodox way.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
Yeah, I hope to achieve to be able to usher people and having a stronger relationship with the Lord, and also myself. To be able to just have fun and learn about God. It doesn't need to be serious like the Catholic Church, I mean, I don't think God intended for us to be all stewed and stiff. David praised him naked in the field. Yeah. So hey,
do what you need to do, folks. Okay?
Right.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
Oh, wow. Woo, what is my life's purpose? That is a deep question. I guess my life's purpose is to be able to use my gifts for the Lord. And that is a journey in itself to learn what your gifts are
Mm,
and how to use it, to make, the world a better place.
wonderful. Well, Ashley, again, I thank you so much. I look forward to getting together with you on your podcast soon. And again, I thank you for giving us so much time here on the program.
Yeah, thank you.
And I thank you for listening and watching. Tell me your story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to lol.